When I arrived in this world, the system suddenly forced me to choose one cheat ability from several unbelievable options, and the moment I saw them, even I couldn't believe they were real. The first was control over time. The second was infinite space. The third was guidance of fate. The fourth was the thread of cause and effect. But when my eyes landed on the fifth option, I froze for a moment because unlike the others, it only had two simple words written on it: absolute strength. I stared at that strange fifth option for a long time and started wondering just how absurdly powerful something had to be to deserve such a ridiculous name. I genuinely wanted to know how strong absolute strength really was, so without any hesitation, I chose the fifth option. Soon after, I was thrown into a fantasy world, and the sunlight there was so scorching it felt like my entire body was being roasted alive. I slammed my hoe into the dry ground with all my strength, causing dust to explode everywhere. After transmigrating into this cultivation world called the Tian Land Realm, I didn't become some destined protagonist, nor did I receive the luxurious life of a young master. Instead, I became nothing more than one of the lowest outer sect disciples of the Shinon sect, just a spiritual farmer with no spirit roots, no background, and no future. Every single day, all I did was farm crops, carry water, get yelled at by others, and struggle to even eat properly. My stomach growled so hard from hunger that I honestly started thinking I might become the first transmigrator in history to starve to death inside an immortal sect. But right at that moment, a cold, mechanical voice suddenly echoed inside my mind. Host's extreme desire to survive has been detected. Connecting to the absolute strength system. Connection successful. Distributing newbie gift pack. Please select one of the 5 supreme laws as your starting talent. In an instant, the entire world froze. The wind stopped blowing. The clouds stopped moving. Even the birds in the sky looked as if they had been nailed in place. The dust floating in the air completely stopped. My heart started pounding violently because I knew this wasn't an illusion. The cheat I had been waiting for as a transmigrator had finally arrived. 5 glowing balls of light slowly appeared before me one after another. Law of time. Control the past and future. With a single thought, you may reverse the flow of time itself. Law of space. Travel across dimensions and throughout the universe. In a single step, cross oceans of stars. Law of fate, rewrite destiny itself. All living beings shall become your puppets. Law of cause and effect. Those touched by it are doomed to certain death. You shall become untouchable by all powers. Every single one of them was overflowing with terrifying special effects and overwhelming pressure. Any one of these powers felt capable of destroying the entire world. My eyes widened in shock, and honestly, I almost closed my eyes and picked randomly because they were all too insane. But at that exact moment, my stomach growled again, and that miserable sound instantly dragged me back to reality from my dream of becoming the strongest existence alive. I looked down at my arms, burned dark by the sun, then stared at the endless field in front of me that still needed to be plowed, and suddenly everything became crystal clear in my mind. Would controlling time help me plow the fields? No. Would traveling through space help me carry water? No. Fate and karma sounded cool, sure, but what I needed right now was a full stomach, not some mysterious cosmic principle. So I slowly turned toward the final option. It was the simplest and least noticeable one of them all. Just a plain white sphere of light with no flashy effects at all. Only 2 large and simple words: absolute strength. My eyes instantly lit up. Absolute strength was good, really good. With enough strength, one swing of the hoe could till a massive field. I could carry 2 extra buckets of water. If the spirit rice harvest improved, I could exchange more for spirit stones, and with more spirit stones, I could finally buy steamed buns to eat. Time, space, fate, karma, none of that mattered. I choose the 5th option, absolute strength. The mechanical voice responded immediately. Host selection complete. True greatness lies within simplicity. Strength is the foundation of all things. Congratulations, host, for reaching the origin of power. All system functions are now being transferred. Beginning self-installation. We hope you enjoy your meal. Before I could even react, a warm current suddenly spread throughout my entire body, and then the robotic voice disappeared completely as if it had never existed at all. The frozen world around me started moving again. The sound of insects returned. The wind blew once more. I just stood there silently for a long time, completely stunned. Honestly, I felt scammed. Wait, that was it? Other people's systems had lotteries, exchange shops, daily sign-ins, and at the very least, some kind of customer service. But my system? Incredible! It gave me one choice, disappeared immediately after I picked, and didn't even leave behind after sales support. While I was suppressing my frustration, a sharp, mocking voice suddenly came from nearby. Hey, isn't that Lin Fun? The great lazy bum of the Shinon sect? Why aren't you taking care of your spirit rice properly? Sitting there like you're waiting to die? The one who arrived was Dickenley, the manager of the outer sect, a shameless sycophant who climbed to his position through bootlicking. His favorite hobby was bullying lowly spiritual farmers like us who had no backing or connections. He walked along the edge of the rice field and glanced at my nearly dying spirit rice before immediately showing a disgusted expression. Then he raised his leg and kicked over the bucket of water I had just carried. The bucket crashed onto the ground, and the water I had painstakingly carried from 2 mountains away instantly scattered across the dry earth before evaporating under the scorching heat. My fists tightened so hard my nails almost dug into my skin. That water was something I had carried all the way here with my own hands. But Dickonley acted as if he hadn't even noticed the anger on my face. Slowly, he pulled out a low-grade spirit stone from his robe and waved it in front of me before casually slipping it back into his sleeve. Then he sneered and said, "This month, your crops are the worst among everyone here. According to sect rules, your pay will be reduced. A lazy trash like you should know your place. You can't even grow spirit rice properly, yet you still dream of cultivating? Save that fantasy for your next life." My chest burned with rage the moment I heard those words, but when I looked at the lackeys behind him, all of whom had cultivation levels higher than mine, I could only force myself to endure it. Dickonley snorted in satisfaction before leaving with his men while muttering curses under his breath. A mortal without spirit roots still thinks he deserves to stay in an immortal sect. Only after they disappeared did I finally let out a long breath and bend down to pick up the bucket. As I reached toward the ground, my fingers touched a chunk of black iron ore buried in the dirt, and I instinctively grabbed it, planning to toss it aside. That ore was famous for being absurdly hard. Even the flying swords of inner sect disciples struggled to leave marks on it. But the instant I applied a little force, a faint cracking sound echoed out, and the fist-sized chunk of black iron ore instantly crumbled into powder between my fingers, as fine as black ash. The dust slipped through the gaps in my hand and scattered onto the ground. I froze completely. For a long time, I couldn't move at all. The wind blew softly, spreading the black powder across the dirt, while I stared blankly at my hands and then at the dust beneath me. At that moment, only one thought existed in my head. This absolute strength seemed way more terrifying than I originally thought. Over the next 3 months, I gradually discovered that my talent was far stranger than I imagined. It wasn't just a temporary burst of power, it was endless growth. Every moment, I was becoming stronger. I grew stronger while eating, stronger while farming, and even stronger while breathing. The iron hoe that weighed hundreds of pounds felt lighter than straw in my hands now. I could carry massive jars of water with one hand while walking casually without even sweating or breathing hard, and my speed while plowing the star spirit fields became downright terrifying. What took ordinary disciples 3 full days to finish, I could complete in less than half a day. The only thing that never changed was the fact that I still had no trace of spiritual energy inside my body. So in everyone else's eyes, I remained the same insignificant outer sect spiritual farmer as always, and honestly, I was perfectly fine with that. For me, simply becoming stronger was enough. Whether I became immortal or not came second to having enough food to eat. 3 months later, I stood quietly on the edge of the field, staring at the golden spirit rice swaying before me, and I couldn't stop myself from smiling. Every grain was heavy and full, carrying faint spiritual light while the fragrance of the rice spread through the air. This was the harvest I had worked for over the last 3 months. By my estimate, it could easily be exchanged for no less than 100 low-grade spirit stones. On the day I received that money, not only would I finally get to eat steamed buns, I could even splurge and order an entire bowl of noodles too. Sitting beside the field, I gently rubbed the rice stalks between my fingers while planning what I would eat first. But right at that moment, a deafening thunderclap suddenly exploded across the sky as if the heavens themselves had shattered apart. I instinctively looked up, only to see the previously clear sky instantly darken. Black storm clouds churned violently while purple lightning tore through the heavens. 2 streams of light, one black and one blue, collided more than 10,000 meters above the ground, and every impact released explosions bright enough to cover the sky itself. Even the spiritual energy within hundreds of miles started raging wildly. Immortals are fighting! My expression changed instantly. Just as I feared, the next moment, a furious roar echoed across the heavens. From the blue light, the supreme elder of the Shinan sect shouted in rage, "Swanming! You dare invade the territory of my Shinan sect?" Then from the black light, the monstrous old demon Swan Ming let out a sinister laugh and replied, "Hand over the ascension map. Otherwise, I'll slaughter every disciple on this mountain today." And just like that, 2 Yuan Ying level cultivators began fighting fiercely in the sky. For the cultivators of the sect, this was an extremely rare battle between supreme experts, but for me it was nothing but pure bad luck. And as expected, after another violent clash between their techniques, the uncontrolled aftermath transformed into a massive shockwave visible to the naked eye as it came crashing down from the heavens. In the distance, entire mountain forests were instantly destroyed. The outer sect disciples' houses collapsed one after another, and terrified screams spread everywhere. Then I saw it. That violent tornado-like wave was heading directly toward my spirit rice field. My crops. My eyes turned red instantly. I didn't even think before throwing myself into the field. I spread my arms wide and desperately protected the spirit rice that was almost ready for harvest. A terrifying force slammed directly into my back like a speeding train. If it had been anyone else, their bones and flesh would have exploded instantly, but my body only trembled slightly while I remained standing firmly like a nail hammered into the earth itself. As I endured the attack, I cursed those two old monsters in the sky with everything I had, including their entire bloodlines. I thought things would end if I just endured it long enough. But who could have expected this? The moment the old monster Swan Ming realized he was losing, his expression twisted viciously, and without hesitation, he pulled out his most sacred treasure. A massive compass suddenly appeared in the sky, spinning violently as if it wanted to crush the heavens themselves, and in a single instant, its enormous shadow covered hundreds of miles. An ancient and terrifying natural law descended upon everything below. The Supreme Elder's face changed drastically as he shouted, "This is bad! It's a karmic law artifact!" At that exact moment, the trees stopped growing and instantly began to wither. The spiritual energy inside the cultivators was forcibly drained away, causing their auras to weaken rapidly, and even the life force within all living beings started fading. I could also feel something being taken from me, but honestly, the loss was so small I could barely notice it. But then my eyes suddenly widened as I looked down at the sacred spirit rice beneath me. No! The essence of spirit rice was its growth, its maturation, the very life contained within every grain, and under the power of that heavenly compass, I watched helplessly as the golden spirit field rapidly yellowed, dried out, and decayed before my eyes. Then, with a soft puff, the entire field turned into ash. The wind blew gently, scattering the ashes through my fingers. At that moment, my entire world went silent. I stared blankly at the ashes in my hands and felt something inside my mind snap completely. Those weren't just spirit crops. That was 3 months of my life. That was my steamed buns, my bread, and the thing that would have kept me alive for the next several days. Meanwhile, the old demon Swan Ming continued laughing arrogantly in the sky. Inside this compass formation, whether human or object, everything shall become an offering to my treasure. Slowly, I stood up with my head lowered, hiding the expression on my face from everyone around me. Quietly, I tightened my grip on the old, worn-out hoe in my hands. "Pay me back." I didn't shout those words out loud, but inside me they exploded like thunder. I pointed the hoe toward the black figure in the sky, who acted as though he were some god above all existence. Then I adjusted my stance into the same familiar posture I had repeated thousands upon thousands of times before. The perfect farming stance. And with the full power of my arms, I swung the hoe down with everything I had. There was no spiritual energy, no magical light, no flashy phenomenon or heavenly miracle. There was only pure, absolute strength. The instant the hoe swung forward, the air in front of me suddenly compressed into a fan-shaped wave before disappearing entirely, forming a massive white vacuum shockwave visible to the naked eye. Everywhere it passed, space itself was violently torn apart like fragile paper, and countless black cracks exploded across the sky while shattered fragments scattered everywhere like broken glass. The arrogant smile frozen on old demon Swan Ming's face instantly stiffened. The heavenly compass he was so proud of didn't even survive for a single blink beneath that pure physical force before exploding apart with a deafening crack, turning into countless fragments of spiritual light. Swan Ming immediately spat out blood as his face filled with absolute horror. "Impossible. What kind of power is that?" Before he could even finish speaking, the force that tore apart space itself completely swallowed him whole. There was no explosion, no scream. Together with half of the towering mountain behind him, he was crushed into particles finer than dust and erased entirely from this world. Before dying, only one final thought remained inside his mind, filled with overwhelming fear and confusion as it echoed through the heavens. What supreme law is this? I stood quietly beside the ruined field, while the hoe in my hands suddenly cracked in half with a loud snap. I looked toward the mountain that had been cleanly sliced apart, the cut so smooth it looked like polished glass. Then I scratched my head casually, tossed the broken hoe aside, and muttered, "What law? There's no law. This is just pure force." After saying that, I completely lost interest in looking at the sky anymore. I lowered my head and returned to the ruined field. Among the scattered ashes, I searched regretfully for a long time until finally, after digging around everywhere, I found only half a stalk of spirit rice that hadn't completely turned into ash. I let out a long, exhausted sigh and carried that pitiful half-stalk of rice back toward my broken little hut. To me, pulverizing a nascent soul old demon and flattening half a mountain simply wasn't as important as figuring out what I was going to eat tomorrow. But high above in the sky, the supreme elder of the Shinon sect, who had witnessed everything from beginning to end, was completely stunned. The supreme elder stared blankly at the mountain that had been sliced apart so cleanly it looked like a mirror, then slowly shifted his gaze toward my back as I walked farther away from the battlefield. His entire body trembled violently, but it wasn't fear. It was overwhelming excitement and disbelief. At that moment, he suddenly remembered a 10,000-year-old legend passed down within the Shingon sect. According to the ancient records, the founding ancestor of their sect was not a spiritual cultivator at all, but an ancient body cultivator whose path had long vanished from the world. The legend claimed that he never ascended to the heavens. Instead, he remained hidden inside the sect, disguising himself as a mortal, living among ordinary people, while silently waiting for the right time to appear again. The more the Supreme Elder thought about it, the redder his eyes became with excitement. One attack destroyed a karma treasure. Pure physical force tore apart space itself. This is divine strength that surpasses laws, the result of perfecting the Tao of strength. I can't be mistaken. That senior, he must be the hidden ancestor of our sect. Trembling uncontrollably, he hurriedly pulled out a communication jade slip and shouted with all his strength, "Report immediately to the sect master! The hidden ancestor of our Shingon sect has awakened!" The moment he finished shouting, his eyes rolled back from overwhelming joy, and he fainted on the spot, falling directly from the sky. Meanwhile, inside my broken little hut, I sat there blankly, while holding the half-stalk of spirit rice in my hand. Only one thought filled my head. Would this tiny amount of rice even be enough for one meal? Not long after, Sect Master Chu Tianko arrived together with several peak masters. The moment they saw the mountain that had been cut apart, everyone fell completely silent. Peak Master Danding's face turned pale instantly, while Peak Master Liang carefully examined the remaining aura around the slash and nearly collapsed in shock. Within the cut itself, there was no spiritual energy, no traces of magical techniques, only an unbelievably terrifying power of pure destruction. Even the cracks within space itself still hadn't completely healed. This is impossible. No Yuan Ying cultivator could ever achieve this. This surpasses even the capabilities of a void saint. This is true power, capable of shattering all laws. Chu Tianko took a deep breath and slowly observed the battlefield once more before his eyes eventually landed on the only patch of land that remained completely untouched, my spirit field. That land had been located directly in the center of the explosions and magical attacks, yet it remained intact, and even more terrifying, the soil itself had turned pitch black, while the spiritual energy inside it became so dense it was almost impossible to measure. One of the peak masters who specialized in earth veins immediately crouched down to inspect it before screaming in shock, "Supreme-grade spirit soil! No! This is even 10 times more effective than supreme-grade spirit soil. Any spiritual plant grown here would mature within only 100 years. Instantly, countless thoughts appeared in the minds of the peak masters. When our ancestor attacked, he stood exactly here. The one thing he protected wasn't himself. It was these crops. And by accident, through his divine law-breaking power, he transformed ordinary land into an unparalleled, sacred field. Incredible. With a single move, he protected the crops while forcing back a Yuan Ying old monster. This is the true demeanor of a supreme expert. The more they thought about it, the more convinced they became. Chu Tianko immediately gave his orders. Everything that happened today will become the highest secret of the Shingon sect. Anyone who dares leak this information will have their cultivation crippled and be expelled from the sect immediately. This location shall now be treated as sacred ground. No one may enter without permission. The entire sect will secretly search for our ancestor who has disguised himself as a mortal. However, no one is allowed to disturb him. You may only observe from afar. Just like that, the entire Shingon sect entered its highest state of alert because of me, while I remained completely unaware of everything. That night, I slept peacefully inside my broken hut. The next morning, when I woke up and looked at the now empty field, my heart twitched painfully for a moment. But I quickly forced myself to calm down. Even if the crops were gone, I could always plant more. As long as I was alive, I still needed to eat. I walked toward a hidden corner inside the hut, removed a loose floor tile, and carefully pulled out a small cloth pouch wrapped in oil paper. When I opened it, 3 rice seeds glowing like gold appeared inside. They looked as if they had been forged from pure golden metal itself. I got those seeds 3 years ago, shortly after I first arrived in this world, when I traded half a piece of bread to an old starving farmer who looked like he was about to die from hunger. The old man told me they were seeds of the ancient golden dragon tooth rice, and according to him, a single grain was enough to completely transform a person's fate. Back then, I thought he was just exaggerating, but because the seeds looked far too extraordinary, I couldn't bring myself to use them out of pure reluctance. And now, all my remaining hope rested on those 3 seeds alone. I walked quietly toward the edge of the field and noticed the soil had become pitch black and strangely fertile. I scooped up a handful and immediately felt how soft and rich it was, while an astonishing amount of spiritual energy flowed within it. Still, I didn't think too much about it. I simply assumed the battle between immortals last night had somehow nourished the earth. Carefully, I dug 3 small holes and planted the golden dragon tooth rice seeds one by one before slowly watering them. As I looked at the soil that now carried my final hope, I finally smiled again. But the peaceful moment didn't last long. A loud, arrogant voice suddenly shattered the morning silence. "Isn't that trash Linfen? Ha! Looks like you somehow survived yesterday after all." I raised my head and immediately saw Wang Teng approaching. He was Dick and Lee's nephew, and thanks to his uncle's influence and his early foundation establishment cultivation, he constantly bullied everyone in the outer sect. A group of lackeys followed closely behind him, but the moment he approached, the first thing he noticed wasn't me. It was the black, spiritual soil beneath my feet. His eyes instantly lit up with greed. What incredible land. Then he burst into laughter and casually tossed half a spirit stone toward me. "You worthless trash. I'm taking this land now. That half spirit stone is your compensation. Get lost." I didn't even look at the spirit stone lying on the ground. Calmly, I said, "Senior Brother Wang, this field was assigned to me by the sect, and I just planted seeds there." "Seeds?" Wang Teng sneered coldly before lifting his foot and stepping directly onto the soil. Then he deliberately twisted his heel twice with full force. When he lifted his foot again, a dazzling golden color was stuck to the sole of his shoe. My golden dragon tooth rice seed had been completely crushed. My entire body instantly froze. But Wang Teng still wasn't satisfied. He looked down at me with a cruel, arrogant grin and said, "A mortal like you thinks he deserves treasure like this? Crushing your seed is doing you a favor. Now grab your garbage and disappear from my sight." Slowly, I stood up and brushed the dirt off my hands. There was no anger on my face. No fear either. I was as calm as still water. Then I raised my head, looked at the golden stain on the sole of his shoe, and quietly asked, "Do you even know how valuable that seed was? I saved it for 3 years." The moment our eyes met, Wang Teng suddenly felt nervous for some reason. But that nervousness instantly turned into embarrassment and rage. He immediately pulled out his longsword and blazing flames erupted from its blade. "What? You're just a mortal! Are you planning to fight a cultivator like me?" The lackeys behind him instantly became excited. "That's the blazing sword technique. That idiot's dead." A burning sword aura rushed directly toward me. I frowned slightly. It felt a little hot against my face, so I casually raised my right hand and lightly slapped toward Wang Teng's arrogant face. My movement didn't even look powerful. It felt more like I was swatting away an annoying fly. But the moment my palm moved, the air in front of it suddenly compressed violently, forming a visible white crescent-shaped wall of pressure. Wang Teng's seemingly impressive sword aura struck it without even making a sound before disappearing instantly. The grin on Wang Teng's face froze completely. Then came the next second. Slap. The sound was so loud and crisp it felt like a thunderclap exploding across the heavens. The entire outer sect seemed to fall silent for an instant. The moment my palm touched Wang Teng's face, his body experienced a weight beyond comprehension, followed immediately by a terrifying and indescribable force erupting throughout his entire body. A circular white sonic boom cloud exploded outward and blasted all the disciples behind him flying through the air, while Wang Teng himself didn't even get the chance to scream before turning into a tiny black dot in the distance with a long trail of white smoke behind him. He shattered the sound barrier and instantly flew straight toward the inner sect of the Shinon sect high in the sky. The surrounding disciples crashed onto the ground in confusion, and when they finally managed to stand up again, they stared blankly between the sky and me as if they had just seen a ghost. It took a long time before one trembling disciple finally asked, "What exactly was that thing that flew away just now?" Nobody answered him. I simply shook my hand lightly as if wiping away something dirty, then turned around and crouched back down. Carefully, I dug out the remaining half of the crushed golden dragon tooth rice seed buried in the mud. Its golden essence had already mixed with the dirt, and almost no life remained inside it. I let out a sigh, but I still carefully replanted it anyway. Let's just try, maybe it'll survive somehow. To me, whether that half-dead seed could still live was far more important than sending Senior Brother Wang Teng flying across the heavens. Meanwhile, 10 miles away inside the Shinon sect's main discussion hall, Sect Master Chu Tianko and the Peak Masters were still discussing the hidden ancestor. The ancestral land must immediately be declared forbidden territory. Send Golden Core elders in rotating shifts to guard the area. Continue searching for the ancestor secretly, but absolutely do not disturb his mortal world cultivation. While they were speaking, a terrifying crash suddenly exploded in the middle of the hall, causing the entire building to shake violently. Dust rained down from above as every single elder instantly became alert as if a powerful enemy had appeared. Spiritual energy erupted from all of them at once, but the moment they saw what happened, they froze completely. In the center of the hall, embedded deeply into the massive dragon pillar wrapped with carved twin dragons, was a person. Wang Teng's arms and legs were still spread wide open, perfectly embedded into the massive dragon pillar, as if someone had thrown him there with overwhelming force. All the meridians in his body had already shattered, and his breathing was becoming weaker and weaker. The only reason anyone could still recognize him was because of his clothes. The moment Punishment Elder Ju Wuji saw him, his expression twisted in fury instantly. As a golden core cultivator, he immediately spread out his divine sense and quickly traced the source of the attack 10 miles away, directly to the spirit field that the sect had just secretly designated as ancestral land. In the next second, Zhu Wuji's furious roar shook the entire outer sect. "Who dares? Which bastard injured my nephew like this? I'll crush your soul into dust today." Before his words even finished echoing, he transformed into a streak of golden light filled with monstrous killing intent and shot directly toward my tiny hut. At that moment, I had just finished watering the half-dead seed. The instant I heard the furious roar from the sky, the veins on my forehead twitched violently. I looked up at the approaching golden light and suddenly felt a headache coming on. Why is there another one now? I brushed the dirt from my hands while frowning deeply. Can't a person peacefully farm in this place? Boom! The golden light tore through the clouds like a blazing sun, crashing toward the earth. Carrying the terrifying pressure of a golden core cultivator, Zhu Wuji landed directly above my spirit field. His hair and beard floated wildly in rage while golden flames wrapped around his body. His eyes were blood red, and his killing intent had almost become physical. Before he even fully landed, my already broken little hut instantly exploded apart from the pressure alone. Wooden beams snapped loudly while the entire shack collapsed into shattered debris. The surrounding trees cracked apart, and spiderweb-like fractures spread across the earth. Yet through all of it, I remained standing there quietly, looking down at the seeds I had just carefully planted back into the soil. My expression darkened little by little. Zhu Wuji originally expected to find some terrifying monster standing here, but the moment he scanned me with his divine sense, he froze in shock. My body contained absolutely nothing, not the slightest trace of spiritual power, no cultivation aura, no training marks whatsoever. I was truly just an ordinary mortal. Yet this same mortal had beaten his Foundation establishment nephew so badly that he ended up nailed into the sacred dragon pillar of the main hall. At first, Zhu Wuji was stunned, but in the very next moment, the anger in his eyes transformed into greed. He immediately arrived at a single conclusion. I possessed some kind of supreme hidden treasure, one so powerful that even his golden core divine sense couldn't detect it. "So that's how it is," Zhu Wuji muttered while staring directly at me. Instead of growing angrier, he suddenly laughed, a chilling laugh filled with excitement and desire. "How could a mere mortal injure Tenger otherwise? Boy, hand over the magic treasure you possess, and perhaps I'll spare your life." I only glanced at him briefly before lowering my head again to look at the 2.5 remaining seeds buried in the soil. At that moment, I only had one thought in my head. These cultivators really weren't in their right minds. Since I didn't answer, Zhu Wuji immediately lost his patience. He raised his hand and summoned a damaged formation disc. "Since you refuse to cooperate, then I'll simply refine you together with your treasure." The moment he released the formation disc, it rapidly expanded and instantly covered an entire mile around us. "Rise! 9 dragons rage grand formation!" With a deafening hum, a massive crimson barrier descended like a giant dome and sealed me together with the entire spirit field inside it. Then, 9 dragon roars exploded simultaneously as an endless sea of flames erupted from the earth itself. 9 gigantic fire dragons over 100 jang tall emerged from the formation, each one covered in savage scales and claws. Their blazing flames scorched the sky as they circled the formation while roaring furiously. The temperature became more horrifying with every passing second. The ground instantly dried and cracked apart while even the air itself twisted from the heat. The outer sect disciples watching from afar all turned pale with terror. "He's gone mad." Elder Zhu actually used the peak protecting Grand Formation. He plans to burn Linfen and this entire land into glass. For just one outer sect disciple, does it really need to go this far? But I didn't have time to care about them. The moment the sea of fire rose around me, I turned my back toward the flames and used my body to completely shield the 3 small holes where the seeds had just been planted. The fire was too strong. The seeds might get cooked. However, the fire dragons moved closer and closer while the heat slammed against my face. My hair and the edges of my clothes began curling and burning from the temperature. I endured it silently, but the veins near my temples slowly bulged and twitched harder and harder. Will these people seriously never stop? First they destroyed my spirit rice, then they stepped on my seeds, and now they even want to burn the soil itself. Finally, the moment all 9 fire dragons charged toward me simultaneously, I slowly raised my head, and the temperature in my eyes completely vanished. So noisy, I stopped shielding the seed holes and slowly stood up straight. My feet separated apart while I raised both my hands slowly into the air, my palms facing each other. It was an unbelievably ordinary movement, as if I were simply about to clap my hands together. At the same moment, inside the council hall of the Qinyon sect, Sect Master Chu Tianko and the Peak Masters were still discussing the hidden ancestor. But in that exact instant, every single expression in the room suddenly changed as though an invisible hand had squeezed their hearts. A terrifying aura of destruction erupted from the direction of the ancestral land in the outer sect. It wasn't spiritual power. It wasn't laws. It was something completely different. A force so pure and absolute that it seemed capable of crushing all existence itself into nothingness. A force. The moment that terrifying aura erupted, Chu Tianko's entire body went cold. That idiot Zhu Wuji. But by then, it was already too late. Standing in front of the ruins of my broken hut, I slowly brought my palms together. Clap. There was no spiritual light piercing the heavens, no thunder shaking the sky, only a pale white shockwave visible to the naked eye, quietly spreading outward from my body. 1 second later, the 9 fire dragons that moments ago could burn the heavens and boil entire oceans became like candles blown out by the wind. They didn't even have time to roar before all 9 suddenly puffed out of existence at the same time. Then the white shockwave struck the 9 Dragons' Rage Grand Formation itself. Cracks instantly spread across the crimson barrier like shattered glass. The arrogant smile on Zhu Wuji's face hadn't even disappeared yet when the horrifying force rebounded directly back into him. Impossible! Bang! The formation disc exploded apart in midair. Blood burst from Zhu Wuji's mouth while his protective aura shattered instantly. The spiritual energy inside his body spiraled out of control, tearing apart his meridians, and his body fell from the sky like a kite with its strings cut. He slammed into the earth and created a massive crater. When the dust finally cleared, half his body was buried underground, while all spiritual power inside him had completely vanished. But the look in his eyes was even more terrifying than his injuries. It was the expression of someone whose Tao heart had been completely destroyed. Confusion, despair, broken belief. Immortal, how is this possible? No spiritual power, no laws, the cultivation doesn't work like this. He had completely lost his mind. At that exact moment, Chu Tianko and the Peak Masters finally arrived. Their timing was perfect. They saw me just as I finished clapping my hands together before lowering them, and casually rubbing my slightly reddened palms with visible annoyance. Looking around, the fire dragons were gone, the grand formation was completely destroyed, and the mighty Golden Core Elder was lying in the dirt like a dead dog. Silence instantly swallowed everyone present, but that silence only lasted for a single moment. The next second, cold sweat poured down Chu Tianko's back like a waterfall. Ordinary people might not understand what they had just witnessed, but he did. That wasn't a simple clap. I had used the great Tao of strength itself to push space, twist the laws of reality, and create a pure force domain capable of nullifying all techniques. A casual wave of air had destroyed the sect-protecting grand formation. A single clap had crippled a Golden Core Elder. If this wasn't the hidden ancestor, then who else could it possibly be? And even worse, that fool Zhu Wuji had actually angered him. Chu Tianko no longer even dared to land properly. His body trembled before he suddenly dropped straight from the sky and knelt heavily in front of me. His knees smashed 2 deep holes into the ground, while his forehead pressed firmly against the earth. His voice trembled violently as he spoke. Your humble servant, Chu Tianko, failed in disciplining the sect properly and disturbed your peaceful mortal cultivation, Senior. My sins deserve 10,000 deaths. I beg Senior to calm your anger and spare the innocent members of the sect. The moment he knelt, all the Peak Masters behind him immediately followed. We beg Ancestor to calm your anger. The outer sect disciples watching from afar were completely horrified by the scene. The mighty sect master and all the Peak Masters were kneeling before me with their heads lowered, not even daring to look up. Meanwhile, I just stood there blankly, staring first at the people kneeling before me and then at my slightly red palms. After a long silence, I finally said, "It was just hot, so I fanned myself a little. I don't have to pay for this, right?" With just that one sentence, Chu Tianko nearly smashed his forehead open from panic. No, absolutely not. We would never dare. Zhu Wuji was blind and arrogant. Even death would not atone for his crime. Then, terrified that I might still become angry, he immediately offered his greatest treasure. Senior, if you wish to remain within the sect, I am willing to offer you the Chenny spirit realm within the inner sect. It possesses the highest grade spiritual land in all of the Shinon sect, violet gold spirit soil. It has been nourished by a 10,000-year spirit spring, and the spiritual energy there is over 100 times denser than ordinary lands. Furthermore, the sect will fully provide your food and lodging. I guarantee no one will ever disturb your mortal cultivation again, Senior. I was originally about to refuse, but the moment I heard the words highest grade spiritual land, 10,000-year spirit spring, food and lodging included, my eyes instantly lit up. Good land meant good harvests, and good harvests meant more food. A simple smile immediately appeared on my face as I patted Chu Tianko's shoulder. You should have said that from the beginning. You're not bad at all. And just like that, under the stunned gazes of the disciples who felt like they were dreaming, I picked up my broken hoe and followed the overly respectful respectful sect master into the inner sect. From that day onward, the fate of the Shinon sect changed completely. The Cheni spirit realm floated above a sea of clouds and served as the spiritual vein core of the entire Shinon sect. The moment I stepped inside, I froze. The ground beneath my feet glowed with a soft violet gold color, unbelievably rich and fertile, while spiritual energy drifted through the air like thick mist. Even a single handful of soil seemed to shimmer with light. Beside the field, a clear spring flowed from a jade wall, and the purity of the spiritual energy inside it was absolutely shocking. The seat they gave me had the best view in the entire arena and the most complete set of snacks. Honestly, I didn't even want to come because it sounded troublesome, but the moment I saw the spiritual fruits and watermelon seeds laid out on the table, I reluctantly decided to sit down anyway. Below the stage, disciples fought with everything they had while the crowd roared nonstop. But I was getting sleepy just watching them. So instead, I grabbed a spiritual fruit and started chewing on it like watermelon seeds. Crack, crack. I ate happily while half paying attention to the matches. Eventually, it was finally Chu Changjiao's turn to appear. Dressed completely in white, he only used a single sword strike before sending his opponent flying straight off the stage. The crowd instantly exploded with cheers. The Holy Sun is unbeatable! But Chu Changjiao ignored all the praise. The next second, he slowly raised his head. From thousands of meters away, his gaze pierced through the air like a sword and locked directly onto me sitting on the main platform, a mortal with absolutely no spiritual power. "Are you even worthy of sitting there?" His voice echoed through the arena coldly. "Do you dare come down here and receive one strike from my sword?" The entire arena instantly fell silent. Chu Tianko's expression changed so drastically he nearly jumped out of his seat. But at that exact moment, the Grand Elder stretched out a hand and stopped him. Slowly smiling, the old man said, "Sect Master, why are you so nervous? Since he is a senior, receiving guidance from a junior should not be a problem, right?" Chu Tianko trembled with anger. These idiots were literally using their lives to test me. But I had absolutely no idea what they were all thinking about. I was still focused on eating watermelon seeds. I frowned slightly to myself. These seeds are kind of salty today. Next time I need to tell them to use less salt. But to Chu Changjiao, my complete indifference looked like the ultimate humiliation in front of the entire sect. He finally lost his patience completely. In an instant, he transformed into a streak of sword light and descended onto the main stage. Clang! His long sword left its sheath as sword energy swept past my ear and split the cold jade seat behind me cleanly into two halves. "I'm talking to you." Chu Changjiao stood there holding his sword while his white robes fluttered in the wind, his gaze as cold as if he were looking at a corpse. Only then did I stop eating the seeds. Not because I was scared, but because this guy was honestly too noisy. Seeing me finally look up at him, a mocking smile appeared on Chu Changjiao's lips. Then he unleashed the full pressure of his golden core. Great completion cultivation alongside the principles of his sword Dao. "You should feel honored to lose beneath my phantom sword Dao." The moment he finished speaking, his figure blurred. One shadow became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became thousands. In an instant, the entire stage filled with endless sword phantoms, each one sharp enough to seemingly split souls apart. They crossed and layered together until every possible escape route around me was completely sealed. The disciples below the stage were frozen in shock. Even the elders and peak masters turned pale. Sword Dao laws. The Holy Sun has already touched the principles of Sword Dao. This attack, even a nascent soul cultivator would have to avoid it. But while everyone else was horrified, all I felt was eye strain. Looking at those flashing sword shadows felt like staring directly into a giant disco ball. First, I lowered my head and carefully protected the half-plate of watermelon seeds on my lap so the sword energy wouldn't scatter them. Then I looked up again and sighed helplessly. We really can't understand each other at all. Chu Changjiao stood proudly amidst the countless sword phantoms, his voice icy cold. "Kneel. Admit defeat. Leave Cheni Spirit Realm. I might still leave you a little dignity." I honestly felt too lazy to argue with him anymore. Instead, I casually picked up a watermelon seed shell I had just finished eating. It was still slightly wet. Slowly, I pinched it between my thumb and index finger. Then, I performed the simplest action possible. I flicked it. The moment the tiny seed shell left my fingers, space within an inch around it slightly collapsed. Then, it vanished completely. All that remained was an unimaginably fast streak of light impossible for anyone's consciousness to follow. It tore through the air instantly and passed straight through every sword phantom in its path. The countless sword shadows that had looked so dazzling a moment ago all collapsed silently at the same time as the streak passed by them, as though their very existence had been erased by a higher law entirely. The arrogance still remained on Chu Changjiao's face, but now he also felt overwhelming danger. Unfortunately for him, there was no time left to dodge, no time left to react. A tiny sound echoed faintly through the arena. The streak of light struck his tied hair perfectly. Then, in the next second, an indescribable force exploded above his head. His sword aura barrier shattered instantly. More than 10 times faster than when he arrived on stage, his body blasted backward. Boom! He flew across the entire training ground before finally slamming into the giant iron cliff wall thousands of feet away. His white robes tore apart while his long hair scattered wildly. His arms and legs hung limply as he remained embedded in the wall like a crooked painting nailed there by force, slightly swaying in the mountain wind. Silence swallowed the entire arena. Everyone stood frozen. They looked at the tiny figure pinned against the cliff wall, then looked back at me still calmly sitting on the stage. Their minds completely stopped working. The first person to rush forward was the Grand Elder himself. Shocked and furious, he roared as he approached the wall and reached out to pull Chu Chongjiao free. But the instant his fingers touched the object pinning him there, he suddenly froze. Because the thing nailed into the iron wall wasn't some divine treasure or flying sword. It was a burnt black watermelon seed shell. The Grand Elder stared blankly at that tiny watermelon seed shell, while the anger on his face slowly disappeared, replaced entirely by terror and disbelief. Even his worldview had completely shattered. Meanwhile, on the other side, Chu Tianko nearly cried tears of joy. Yes, this was it. Using nothing but a watermelon seed shell, I had shattered the Holy Sun's sword Dao and pinned a peak golden core genius onto a 1,000-foot iron wall. To Chu Tianko, this was the power worthy of a true ancestor. His gamble had been correct. The Xin'an sect had won its bet. But for me, there was nothing worth celebrating about any of this. I simply brushed the crushed seed shells from my hands and stood up. Looking down at the chaotic crowd below with visible annoyance, I said flatly, "Next time, don't call me for this kind of noisy performance again." Then I picked up my broken hoe and turned around to leave. I still need to water my crops, but at that exact moment, I suddenly stopped walking. Not just me. Everyone in the entire Xin'an sect simultaneously felt a bone-piercing chill and overwhelming sense of dread crawl through their bodies. All of them instinctively looked up at the sky. The bright heavens from moments ago had somehow already been swallowed by endless blood-red clouds. The clouds churned like a boiling ocean of blood, while an unbelievably thick demonic aura mixed with boundless resentment descended upon the entire sect. Then a deafening laugh echoed from deep within the crimson clouds. The next second, boom, the clouds split apart. More than 100 warships made entirely from fused giant bones slowly emerged from within the blood sea, wrapped in endless black energy. They blotted out both the sky and the sun, plunging the world into darkness. Immediately after, a voice overflowing with murderous intent thundered across the entire Xin'an sect like the roar of a demon god. People of the Xin'an sect, prepare to die. By the order of our sect master, today shall be the day your sect is erased from existence. The Blood Demon sect had launched a full-scale invasion. The moment those blood clouds descended, I already knew this group hadn't come here just to cause trouble. One after another, the gigantic bone warships floated out from the boiling blood sea. At the prow of every ship stood enormous demon statues staring emotionlessly toward the Xin'an sect, while eerie green soul flames flickered inside their hollow eyes like starving wolves watching helpless sheep. The very next moment, the Blood Demon sect wasted no time speaking further. Boom! From the lead warship, a gigantic crimson beam the size of a collapsing mountain fired directly toward the gates of the Green Cloud sect without mercy. Sect Master Chu Tianko's eyes almost burst from rage. He immediately activated the Grand Barrier protecting the entire mountain range. A massive green light barrier shot into the heavens and barely managed to cover the sect gates in time. But the instant the attack collided with it, the entire Green Cloud sect shook violently as though punched by a giant. The mountains trembled, the earth cracked. Countless outer sect disciples coughed blood and collapsed from the sheer force of the shockwave alone. Worse still, the barrier's light visibly dimmed afterward. Then a cold laugh echoed from the blood clouds again. The Blood Demon sect had finally revealed their trump card. 3,000 years ago, they had secretly infiltrated the Green Cloud sect's barrier and planted blood fiend seeds directly into its core. They had prepared this war for thousands of years solely to wipe the sect from existence completely. Before the voice even finished speaking, all 100 bone warships fired simultaneously. Endless crimson beams rained down like the meteors of an apocalypse. Cracks rapidly spread across the green barrier, while panic instantly consumed the entire sect. Disciples screamed and fled in terror, desperately trying to escape, only to discover every path out of the sect completely sealed off by the bone warships surrounding the mountain. Some people cried. Some fell into despair. Others completely lost their minds from fear. The Great Elder staggered toward Chu Tianko with a pale face and trembling voice. "Sect Master, surrender. If this continues, everyone in the sect will die." But hearing those words only made Chu Tianko's eyes burn hotter. "Silence!" He shoved the Great Elder away fiercely. "The Green Cloud sect only has sect masters who die fighting. We do not have sect masters who surrender." After saying that, he suddenly turned toward the direction of Chenny Peak. In his heart, that was now their only remaining hope. "All of you, protect the barrier core, no matter what happens. I'll go seek help from our ancestor." Chu Tianko moved at full speed, almost crashing directly into the incoming crimson bombardment from his own desperation. But when he finally landed at the entrance of the Chenny Spirit Realm, he froze completely. In front of the cave entrance stood three enormous stones the size of small mountains neatly arranged side by side. The most annoying part was the two giant crooked words carved into the stones. Anti-theft. Chu Tianko stared blankly at those words for a moment before gritting his teeth and slamming his palm against one of the stones with all the power of his primordial soul cultivation. But the stone didn't move even slightly. Instead, the impact shook him so hard that his internal energy turned chaotic, and he nearly coughed blood on the spot. Only then did he realize with horror that this wasn't some spell or magical restriction. These were literally just three ordinary rocks. The only difference was that each one was absurdly heavy to a level even a primordial soul cultivator couldn't comprehend. Chu Tianko froze completely. At that moment, he finally understood. This wasn't a barrier deliberately placed by the senior. He had simply shoved three rocks in front of the entrance casually and forgotten about everything happening outside. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the chaos beyond the mountain, I was humming to myself while carrying two giant buckets of water from the sacred spring. Outside, explosions shook the heavens and earth nonstop, but when I glanced at the darkened sky, I simply assumed a massive storm was coming. Damn, weather keeps changing. After filling the buckets, I carried them toward the fields. This was the thing I was most proud of these past few days. Not the sect, not the spirit realm, not the so-called sacred land. It was the irrigation canal I personally dug over 3 full days. Every strike of the hoe had been precise. The lines were perfectly straight, the depth completely uniform, and from every angle it looked absolutely beautiful. Honestly, I considered it a masterpiece. I even had plans already. Today I'd direct the spirit spring water through the canal, and tomorrow I could finally plant the half seed properly. But nobody could have predicted what happened next. Just as I bent down to pour the sacred spring water into the canal entrance, an ear-splitting howl suddenly exploded overhead. Instinctively, I looked up. A gigantic crimson sphere of light was falling directly toward Chenny Peak. Boom! The explosion shook the entire mountain range violently. It landed right beside my field. The blast wave threw me backward while both buckets flew from my hands and all the sacred spring water spilled everywhere. I steadied myself and slowly looked back down. Then I froze. The canal I had spent 3 whole days digging, the perfect canal I had been so proud of, the canal I planned to use to save my seed, now had a massive smoking crater right in the middle of it. The canal was ruined. The water was gone. The sacred spring water I had just carried with so much effort drained uselessly into the smoking hole before disappearing completely. At that moment, the cannon fire outside, the screams of war, and the thunderous collapse of the mountain barrier all suddenly felt extremely distant to me. I simply stood there staring at the destroyed canal. Slowly, the smile disappeared from my face. After a very long silence, I finally raised my head. My gaze passed across the entirety of Chenny Peak, beyond the mountain barrier, and landed directly on the bone warship in the sky whose cannon was still smoking. I dug that canal for 3 whole days. My voice was quiet. So quiet it sounded like I was only speaking to myself. You bastards flying around up there. You've really pissed me off now. After saying that, I didn't pick up my broken hoe. I didn't even bother fixing the buckets. Instead, I calmly turned around and walked toward the rear of the field. There stood the sacred mountain stone that had existed since the founding of the Shinon sect itself. According to legend, even 100,000 Yuan Ying cultivators working together couldn't move it even slightly. Meanwhile, aboard the main flagship of the Blood Demon sect, everyone was celebrating wildly. The demonic cultivator who fired the shot was even proudly bragging about it. The one-eyed captain assumed they had merely struck an earth vein node behind the Green Cloud sect mountain. Laughing loudly, he immediately ordered all the bone warships to recharge their spirit cannons and continue bombarding the rear mountains without restraint. In their eyes, the Green Cloud sect was already food sitting inside their mouths. They could carve it apart however they pleased. But in the very next moment, the disturbance began from below. The first people to notice something wrong were several inner sect disciples. When they suddenly turned around, they saw the sacred guardian stone behind me slowly rising from the ground. There was no magical light, no spiritual energy, not even the slightest sign of cultivation power. I was simply lifting it with pure strength alone. Beneath the massive stone, the veins on my arms bulged violently while my legs sank deep into the earth, and the ground around me cracked apart from the pressure of my footing. Then I slowly placed the sacred stone, a boulder as huge as a small mountain, onto my shoulder. The moment everyone saw that scene, their minds went completely blank. Even Chu Tianko froze in disbelief. Only now did he finally understand why earlier he could not even push aside the 3 stone barriers at the gate. Because to me, those things were nothing more than tiny pebbles. Even the people from the Blood Demon insect faction in the sky noticed what was happening below. They paused for a second before bursting into loud laughter. One of them mocked, "What is that tiny insect down there doing? Is he seriously lifting a rock to throw at us?" Another laughed even harder and said, "Pathetic and ridiculous. He's about to die and he's still playing games like this." A sneer had only just appeared on the face of the Cyclops cabin master when I finally moved. My legs lowered, my waist twisted, and every ounce of strength in my entire body gathered together into one terrifying force as I entered the perfect throwing stance. In the very next second, I released everything. A deafening explosion echoed out. The 10-meter area beneath my feet instantly collapsed half a foot into the ground, and the sacred stone weighing more than 100,000 jinn disappeared the moment it left my hands. Right after that, a flaming meteor tore through the sky with a massive trail of fire behind it, shooting upward like a meteorite that had been forcibly thrown back into heaven itself. It was too fast, unbelievably fast. The alarm on the Blood Demon flagship had only just begun ringing, yet the people operating the ship could not even react in time. It was so fast that the defensive formation never even activated. The first expression to shatter was the Cyclops cabin master's face. Then came a world-shaking impact. There was no fancy magic, no special ability involved, only pure and simple collision. But because it was so pure, the kinetic force behind it became absolutely horrifying. The armor at the front of the bone ship caved inward instantly, and the entire keel released a terrifying sound of twisting and breaking before the flagship split directly into two from the middle. The massive ship exploded apart on the spot. Countless demon cultivators never even had the chance to react before they fell together with the destroyed bone ship, while many others dropped from 10,000 meters in the sky like dumplings raining down from heaven. They slammed violently inside and outside the gates of the Chin Beyonsec sect and died instantly. A huge section of the sky suddenly became empty. Meanwhile, I stood there on Cheney Peak and calmly lowered my hand without a single trace of emotion. I even brushed the dust off my palm as if I had merely tossed away a rotten piece of wood blocking my path. Then I raised my head and looked toward the remaining bone ships. My voice was terrifyingly calm as I said, "One ship is nowhere near enough compensation for my canal. Since all of you are already here, don't bother leaving anymore." What happened next became something the entire Chinian sect would never forget for the rest of their lives. I walked toward the edge of the mountain and picked a larger stone with a more comfortable grip. I lifted it casually, weighed it in my hand for a moment, and then threw it again. Then came the third stone. Alone by myself, I started an anti-air battle unlike anything the cultivation world had ever seen before. The smaller stones weighed dozens of tons, while the larger ones weighed hundreds. If I liked a mountain rock, I simply ripped it straight out from the roots of the mountain behind me by force and turned it into ammunition. Boom! One after another, gigantic flaming boulders with long tails of fire shot upward into the sky like a reverse meteor shower raining from the earth itself. There were no exchanges of magic, no clashes of spiritual techniques, only pure weight and speed. And at that moment, everyone finally realized that when those two things reached an absolute extreme, spiritual shields, magical defenses, and even the armor of demon ships became nothing more than paper. One bone ship was smashed apart midair by a boulder before exploding instantly like fireworks. Two other bone ships desperately tried to dodge left and right, but in the end, they were pierced through together by an even larger stone like pieces of barbecue meat skewered on a stick before their bodies completely fell apart. A few demon cultivators barely managed to escape from the ships, but before they could even finish using their powers, the violent wind pressure from the massive flying stones crushed their bodies apart and turned them into ashes. The blood demon insect sect went from arrogance to fear, and finally into complete despair even faster than their bone ships were being destroyed. "Run! This isn't a war, it's a massacre!" someone screamed in terror. Another shouted desperately, "He's not human! He's a demon!" But it was useless for them to realize that now, because by that point, I was becoming more and more skilled at throwing. The mountain behind the Green Cloud sect was slowly being flattened by my hands while the number of bone ships in the sky kept decreasing one after another. Chu Tianko stood there staring blankly at everything happening before him, tears slowly streaming down his face from pure shock and admiration. He kept muttering repeatedly, "True power is simple. It returns to the purest form. This is the method of an immortal." Then my hand casually grabbed another enormous stone, and the moment Chu Tianko saw it clearly, his expression suddenly froze. "Senior, I think that's my meditation chamber." Before he could even finish speaking, his meditation room was already flying into the sky with a flaming tail behind it, and with a single impact, it completely destroyed the three bone ships trying to escape. Chano's entire body trembled violently before his face filled with even deeper admiration and fear. Amazing, truly amazing throwing technique. To contribute even a little to Senior's divine power is my greatest honor. After some time, out of the hundreds of bone ships from the Blood Demon sect that had once covered the entire sky, only 3 heavily damaged ships remained, struggling at the very edge of the horizon. I picked up the last nearby stone, preparing to finish all of them at once, but suddenly the entire sky turned dark. It was not because of storm clouds, nor because of bad weather. This darkness was thick and sticky like fresh blood, and without any warning, it swallowed the entire world whole. Then a horrifying pressure far beyond the nascent soul realm descended from the heavens. The giant stones, still flying through the air, suddenly froze in place. In the next instant, they silently crumbled into dust. Cold rain began falling from the sky as an ancient, hoarse voice filled with endless fury echoed directly into the souls of everyone present. "Who dares destroy the foundation of my blood demon sect? In the very next moment, the entire world started twisting violently. The sect gates, the training grounds, the shattered remains of the bone ships, the sky, the earth, everything looked as though it had been crushed apart and reshaped by an invisible hand. When everyone regained their senses, the ground beneath their feet was no longer limestone earth, but a boiling sea of blood filled with floating bones and corpses. Above us was no longer the sky, but a gigantic swirling vortex of crimson blood endlessly rotating overhead. Within 100 li, the entire Chinyan sect had been forcibly dragged into another dimension. Above the sea of blood, inside the realm of spirit transformation, an old man wearing blood-colored robes slowly appeared. His body was thin like dried wood, while his hair and beard hung in complete disorder. Inside his eyes, it looked as though 2 rivers of boiling blood were flowing endlessly. He was the legendary spirit transformation ancestor of the Blood Demon sect, the one who had secluded himself for 10,000 years and was rumored to have died long ago, the Blood River ancestor. The moment he appeared, Chu Tianko and everyone else completely lost all hope. Nascent soul cultivators, sect leaders, elders, inner disciples, outer disciples. Inside this horrifying world of blood rivers, none of them could even move under the terrifying pressure. The spiritual protection around some cultivators shattered instantly under the blood water, and without any strength left, they sank helplessly into the sea of blood below. The others could not even use their spiritual energy anymore, so all they could do was watch helplessly as they and their companions were slowly swallowed by the sea of blood. The Grand Elder lay weakly on the blood water, his face pale as he muttered to himself in despair, "It's over. This is the spirit transformation realm. Even reincarnation itself will be denied to us here." From high above, the Blood River ancestor looked down upon the hopeless scene before finally shifting his gaze toward me as if he were looking at nothing more than a slightly stronger ant. "So you are the mortal who threw those stones. Interesting physical body you have there. What a pity. Inside my Blood River realm, law is absolute. Here only my will exists. That tiny bit of strength of yours cannot even move a grain of dust." His voice was slow, arrogant, and filled with the pride of someone enjoying the feeling of standing above all others while passing judgment. But I never listened to a single word he said because from the very beginning, I was not even looking at him. My head was lowered the entire time, and all my attention was focused on my feet. The cloth shoes I had just bought that morning were now completely soaked in the foul, sticky blood water. Their surface was dirty, and every step felt disgusting beneath my feet. The feeling irritated me deeply. I did not care about some spirit transformation realm or whatever laws he controlled. Right now, all I wanted was to leave this filthy place as quickly as possible and find a clean river to wash my feet. After a long silence, I finally raised my head. For the first time, my expression became truly serious. "My new cloth shoes are dirty now." The moment I said that, I slowly lifted my right leg. There was still no spiritual energy, no magical light, not even the slightest preparation worthy of an immortal battle. But as my leg rose, the space around it seemed unable to endure some unimaginable weight and began distorting slightly. Rip. The fabric around my pants suddenly tore apart, revealing the muscles of my leg inch by inch like black iron forged by the heavens themselves. In the next second, I faced the endless sea of blood beneath me and stomped down with all my strength. Boom. That stomp did not feel like someone stepping on the ground. It felt as though the entire world had been struck directly by a giant hammer. A white shockwave exploded across the surface of the blood ocean, and wherever it passed, the endless sea of blood capable of trapping nascent soul cultivators did not even last a moment. It instantly evaporated from the terrifying heat and explosive force, turning into steam before disappearing completely. With a single stomp, the entire blood sea dried up. Right after that, the entire Blood River realm began collapsing violently. The dimension twisted like a mirror struck directly in the center by a massive hammer as endless cracks spread everywhere. The arrogance on the Blood River ancestor's face froze instantly. In the next moment, the space shattered apart, and the force of the realm's laws rebounded directly onto him. His aura weakened to the extreme, and his body immediately suffered irreversible damage. Everyone's vision blurred for a second, and when they regained consciousness, we were already standing once again inside the training grounds of the Chinyan sect. The bright sky was still there above us, as if the sea of blood from earlier had only been a nightmare. But the Blood River ancestor floating in the sky had become so faint he looked like a strand of smoke that could disappear at any moment. He stared at me with nothing left in his eyes except endless fear. You never used spiritual power. You never relied on laws. Then how did your strength crush even space itself? Before he could finish speaking, his immortal body completely shattered from the remaining aftershock. With a loud rumble, his body and soul exploded into ashes that scattered across the sky. The only thing left behind was a faintly glowing storage ring that fell from the air with a clear metallic clang before rolling across the ground. It contained the entire wealth of a divine transformation ancestor. Every survivor in the Chinyan sect stared at it with trembling eyes, their breathing unconsciously growing heavier. Then I slowly walked toward it, and everyone's hearts nearly stopped. They thought that finally even I would show interest in a treasure belonging to an immortal. But when I reached the ring, I did not even glance at it once. I casually kicked it away like a tiny pebble blocking the road and sent it flying into some random corner. Then I stepped past the scattered ruins and bent down. From beneath a pile of broken stones, I picked up the wooden bucket that had been crushed and pierced full of holes from the explosions. I simply stood there holding the damaged bucket in my hand. I stared at the cracks covering the wooden bucket in my hands and let out a disappointed sigh. Now I have to go back to town and buy another bucket again. After that terrifying battle, the entire Chinyan sect became so silent it almost felt unnatural. But that silence only lasted for a moment. In the next second, Chu Tianko suddenly rushed toward me like a madman before dropping to the ground while still sliding across the dirt. He grabbed my leg tightly and started speaking incoherently. "Senior, great ancestor master, please accept this disciple's respect." The moment he did that, thousands of disciples behind him simultaneously fell to their knees. It looked like an endless sea of people, and the sound of their voices almost shook the mountain gates apart. "Welcome back, great ancestor master. Please forgive us, ancestor master." "Ancestor master!" My head immediately started hurting from all the noise. I looked down at Chu Tianko, who was hugging my leg with all his strength, frowned slightly, and shook my leg once. "Let go." But instead of releasing me, he hugged even tighter. "Ancestor master, you are the heavens of our Chinyan sect. You are our guide on the path of cultivation." I became too lazy to keep listening. My gaze swept across the kneeling crowd as I spoke in a calm voice. "From today onward, whoever dares climb Chenny Peak and disturb my farming, I'll throw stones at them." The entire place instantly fell silent. In the next second, everyone simultaneously remembered the horrifying scene of flaming meteors being launched from the ground into the sky. Chu Tianko reacted like he had been electrocuted and immediately released my leg before scrambling backward 3 steps and kneeling properly again. This disciple respectfully obeys Ancestor Master's orders. From that day onward, Chenny Peak became both the most sacred and the most terrifying place in the entire Chinyan sect. Not only the disciples and elders, but even birds flying overhead avoided the area. Eventually, a strange custom even formed inside the sect. Before cultivating, disciples would first bow respectfully toward the direction of Chenny Peak. Meanwhile, I had no time to care about any of that. I was busy repairing irrigation channels, fixing the farmland, and thinking about how to revive that half-dead spiritual root. Half a month later, just as the Chinyan sect was barely recovering from the destruction of the Great Battle, a golden decree from Zhongzhou suddenly arrived at the sect's main hall. One of the greatest opportunities in the Tianland realm was about to appear. The secret realm of the ancient immortal venerable was about to open. The moment the news spread, the sect elders became excited at first, but shortly afterward, they all fell into despair. The Chinyan sect was simply too weak. How could they possibly compete against the sacred lands of Zhongzhou and the ancient clans? Those factions were fighting for the opportunity to become immortals, while if the Chinyan sect entered, they would probably gain nothing at all. Then suddenly, Chu Tianko snapped his fingers as his eyes lit up brightly. "Ancestor Master is here!" That single sentence instantly woke everyone up. That was right. I was here. What holy sons, what holy maidens, what peerless geniuses, what supreme prodigies. In front of me, wouldn't they all end up exactly like those bone ships in the sky? Because of that, Chu Tianko immediately burned incense, bathed, changed into proper robes, and respectfully came outside Chenny Peak. Standing before the 3 stone barriers, he bowed deeply and called out, "This disciple, Chu Tianko, has an important matter to report to Grand Ancestor Master." He called for a long time, but there was no response from inside. Finally, unable to hold back anymore, he directly explained his purpose. "Ancestor Master, the secret realm of the ancient immortal venerable is about to open. The future of our Chinyan sect depends on this opportunity. We beg you to come out." His voice became even more passionate as he continued. "Ancestor Master, please lead us to defeat the various geniuses and seize the opportunity to become immortals." This time, the door finally opened. I walked out while yawning and casually glanced at him. My answer was direct. "I'm not going." Chu Tianko instantly panicked. "Ancestor Master, it's the inheritance of an immortal venerable." I scratched my ear lazily and replied, "Can you eat that?" Then I looked toward my fields. My spirit rice is about to ripen. I can't leave. Chu Tianko was practically burning with anxiety at this point. He talked about ascending to heaven in broad daylight, achieving eternal life alongside heaven and earth, peerless inheritances, supreme magical treasures, and lost divine techniques. He listed almost every benefit he could possibly think of. But throughout all of it, I only gave one answer. Not interested. Just as I was about to turn around and head back into the house, Chu Tianko suddenly thought of something. He abruptly shouted one word. "Fertilizer, Grand Master!" My hand stopped on the door instantly. Slowly, I turned my head around. Seeing hope appear, Chu Tianko hurriedly revealed his final trump card. I investigated the ancient records. At the very center of that secret realm, there is a portion of 10,000 years Xeron spirit soil. It was created from a strand of original Earth Ki from the beginning of the world itself and contains endless vitality. It is the highest grade divine soil in the entire world, the ultimate fertilizer. The moment he finished speaking, something flashed before his eyes. In the very next second, I was already holding him by the collar with his body dangling in midair. My eyes were shining brightly, and even my breathing became slightly hotter. I stared directly at him and slowly asked for confirmation. 10,000-year fertilizer. Are you sure? My grip around Chu Tianko's collar tightened so much his eyes were practically rolling back from suffocation, but he still nodded desperately. Yes, absolutely. Forget 10,000 jin. It could probably even grow spirit rice reaching 100,000 jin. The moment I heard that, I immediately released him and let him crash onto the floor. Then I turned around and hurried back into the house. Wait here. After several moments of rummaging through things inside, I finally came back out carrying 3 enormous snakeskin sacks on my shoulders. Written across the sacks were 3 simple words: Prosperous Annie Brand. In my other hand, I held a hoe polished so much it almost reflected light like a treasure artifact. I looked at Chu Tianko, who was still sitting on the floor trying to breathe properly, and spoke briefly. Enough talking, let's go. 1 hour later, in front of the Chinian sect's gates, the transportation array activated. There were only 3 people leaving. Sect Master Chu Tianko stood there with a serious expression, while beside him, Chu Chaniao had long since lost the arrogant attitude that once made him act superior to everyone. Ever since he had been nailed to a cliff wall using nothing but sunflower seeds and personally witnessed me destroying bone ships and crushing a nascent soul domain, the way he looked at me had completely changed from hostility into fanatical worship. As for me, I stood at the front of the group with 1 giant sack carried over my shoulder and 2 more tied around my waist. In my hand was the shining hoe, while on my feet were still the same broken straw sandals. The way I looked did not resemble someone going to compete for immortal destiny at all. I looked more like a farmer heading to the market to buy fertilizer. I was even getting impatient. Hurry up already. Why are you all so slow? What if we arrive late and all the fertilizer gets taken first? A flash of light erupted, and the 3 of us disappeared into the transportation array. In the next moment, we arrived at Zongo, Fallen Immortal Valley. Space twisted as spiritual light spread everywhere, and what greeted us was an unbelievably dense concentration of heaven and earth energy mixed with an aura completely opposite to mine. The entire valley overflowed with grand immortal aura. Precious treasures shined everywhere, while auspicious light illuminated the surroundings. In the sky above, holy sons from sacred lands rode golden chariots pulled by 9-headed dragons, while others stood atop 7-colored flying swords. Holy maidens from immortal sects wore robes whiter than snow while riding white jade towers through the air. Heirs from ancient clans stood surrounded by strange divine beasts. Every single one of them carried holy light around their bodies, and their presence alone made others feel small. It was as though they had been born to naturally stand at the center of everyone's attention. Before long, their gazes slowly shifted toward our direction. At first, they casually glanced at Chu Tianko and Chu Chanyao without giving them any importance at all. But then, their eyes landed on me, the man dragging giant snakeskin sacks behind him, carrying a hoe, wearing broken straw sandals, and wandering around like an old farmer who had just entered the city for the first time in his life. In an instant, the entire Fallen Immortal Valley filled with mocking looks, ridicule, and complete disbelief, all directed straight at me. After a brief moment of silence, the entire Fallen Immortal Valley suddenly burst into laughter. First came Long Asian, the holy son of the Sheno sacred land, riding a golden chariot pulled by 9 black dragons. Then arrived the Holy Maiden of Yaochi, aboard a white jade tower. After that came the chief disciple of the Shusan sword sect, standing atop an ancient sword whose energy stretched straight into the heavens. Every holy son and holy maiden that appeared was surrounded by dazzling divine light. Their entrances were magnificent, each one grander and more imposing than the last. But when it came to me, dragging snakeskin sacks marked harvest while carrying a hoe, and standing on the teleportation platform wearing broken straw sandals, all eyes still turned toward me at the exact same time. There was no helping it. I looked way too much like an old village farmer heading into town to buy vegetables. Almost instantly, loud ridicule and mocking laughter flooded over the 3 of us from every direction. Does the Chinian sect not have anyone else left? Why did they bring some countryside farmer here? What are those sacks for? Is he planning to fill them with spirit stones? Ha 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 ha. Maybe he really came here to dig farmland. Chu Tianko's face turned red from humiliation, but he did not dare make a move. Chu Chaniao, however, could not endure it any longer and immediately drew his sword. The sword aura of an early nascent soul cultivator shot into the sky as he pointed it directly toward the people laughing the loudest. Just as chaos was about to erupt, I casually reached out and lightly grabbed his shoulder. Why bother arguing with them? I yawned while adjusting the sack on my shoulder, then spoke in an extremely serious tone as if discussing something truly important. Save your strength. What matters more is digging enough soil once we get inside. Chu Chanyao froze for a second before silently sheathing his sword and stepping back behind me. But in Long Aishan's eyes, that scene carried an entirely different meaning. To him, it looked obvious that I was simply a coward avoiding trouble. I had stopped the only person in my sect willing to fight and chosen to back down instead. Coward, he snorted coldly, his eyes full of contempt. But in the very next moment, he silently unleashed his pressure. It was the power of someone at the peak of the Golden Core stage, yet far stronger than ordinary cultivators at the same realm. The invisible force crashed toward me like a gigantic tidal wave. He wanted to force me to kneel in front of everyone. The result was immediate humiliation, just not mine. Chu Tianko and Chu Chanyao instantly turned pale. It felt as though a massive mountain had descended upon them, forcing them to use all of their spiritual power just to remain standing. But for me, it was completely meaningless. That overwhelming pressure capable of crushing mountains landed on my body, yet forget making me kneel. Even my faded patchwork clothes did not move in the slightest. In fact, I actually felt a little chilly. First, I casually picked my ear, then bent down to tighten the straps on my straw sandals. I even glanced around the valley, as if inspecting which patch of land looked best for planting crops. Long Aishan's expression changed immediately. First, he frowned deeply. Then he increased the pressure even more until waves began forming in the surrounding space itself. But I still looked completely uninterested. Because of that, he quickly formed another explanation in his mind. You definitely have a treasure protecting your body. Some rare heavenly artifact hiding your true strength. In an instant, greed filled his eyes. In his mind, a mere farmer like me had no right to possess such a treasure. Kill me and steal the artifact. That thought had only just formed in his head when suddenly an earth-shaking explosion erupted across the center of fallen Immortal Valley. Boom! A gigantic crack in space suddenly split open without warning. Endless divine light burst out from within, followed by ancient spiritual energy so dense it was almost impossible to breathe. The secret realm had opened, and in that exact moment, everyone went completely mad. Holy sons, holy maidens, heirs of ancient clans, every single one of them became like wolves spotting fresh meat. They immediately unleashed their unique powers and rushed toward the crack, terrified of falling even one step behind and losing the inheritance of the immortal venerable to someone else. But I was not in a hurry at all. First, I carefully checked whether the 3 sacks had any holes. Then I took my hoe and tapped it against the ground to test its feel in my hand before nodding in satisfaction. Carrying all my equipment, I slowly walked toward the spatial crack. But the instant one of my feet stepped inside, roar! A terrifying dragon roar capable of crushing souls suddenly exploded from deep within the crack itself. In an instant, all the geniuses who had rushed ahead were blasted backward like flies being swatted away. They crashed violently onto the ground one after another. Seeing that, I simply pulled my foot back out again. First, I bent down and dusted off my sacks before finally raising my head to see what happened. At the edge of the crack, an enormous dragon head slowly emerged from within the darkness. It was an ancient black dragon, hundreds of feet long. Its scales were darker than night itself, and the terrifying power radiating from its body completely covered the sky. Its power had clearly surpassed the nascent soul realm and stepped into the spirit transformation realm. At that moment, all the geniuses who had been acting arrogant just moments ago instantly turned pale. But the temptation of the immortal venerable's inheritance was simply too great. Long Aishan gritted his teeth and still stepped forward first. This is the first trial of the secret realm. Join forces and break through it together, he shouted loudly before instantly unleashing his divine lightning dragon control art. 9 dragon-shaped shadows transformed into pillars of purple gold light and smashed toward the black dragon with full force. Right after that came the holy light of Yaochi, the Shushan sword arts, and countless divine abilities exploding forward at the same time. In an instant, treasures illuminated the heavens while natural laws intertwined together. The entire scene was so dazzling it looked as though the sky itself was collapsing, but the result was painfully embarrassing. After a series of metallic clangs, those divine abilities capable of flattening mountains and overturning seas only created tiny sparks upon striking the black dragon's scales. They could not even break its defense. Not a single scratch was left behind. It looked less like immortal arts and more like people scratching an itch. The black dragon itself was clearly becoming irritated. Slowly, it opened its enormous mouth. Run! Fall back! Long Aishan had only just shouted those words when a pitch-black dragon breath swept across the battlefield. There was no explosion, no dramatic clash, only complete annihilation. 3 disciples from sacred lands who failed to dodge, along with their treasures, instantly turned into ashes. This time, everyone was truly terrified. They retreated like madmen, and no one dared step forward anymore. But in the middle of that deafening silence and despair, I calmly carried my hoe through the crowd and slowly walked toward the very front. Because I was not even looking at the black dragon. My gaze had already passed beyond it and locked onto the land behind it. At the center of an ancient formation, a 5-colored patch of spiritual soil, nearly 10 mu wide, emitted a faint glow. The life aura pouring from it was so dense it almost overflowed into the air. 10,000-year Xeron spirit earth. My eyes instantly lit up. I looked at the enormous black dragon standing between me and the fertilizer, and my brows tightened further. In the end, I could not hold back anymore and shouted directly at it, "You're too damn big. You're blocking my digging. Move aside." The entire area fell silent. Long Asian almost burst out laughing. To him, this country bumpkin was actually trying to reason with a demonic beast in the spirit transformation realm. But in the very next moment, the black dragon became furious. Its tail, carrying a sonic explosion powerful enough to distort space itself, whipped downward toward me with terrifying force. This strike was so powerful that forget golden core or nascent soul cultivators, even space itself crumpled beneath its pressure. Chu Tianko's heart turned cold, and he nearly shut his eyes in despair. But I never even tried to dodge. The moment the tail was about to smash into my head, I easily raised my right hand and grabbed it. Boom! The tail capable of crushing even a nascent soul cultivator's soul suddenly stopped inside my palm. Every ounce of kinetic force behind it vanished the instant it touched my hand like a bubble popping into nothingness. It was as if nothing had happened at all. Everyone around us stood there with their mouths hanging open. He caught it with one hand. Even the black dragon itself froze in disbelief. It instantly went berserk, desperately trying to pull its tail back, but my grip held it firmly in place like an ancient divine mountain, pinning it down. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not move even slightly. Its resistance started annoying me, so I tightened my arm and suddenly twisted my waist. "Get up." In a single motion, I violently yanked the 100 Zhang-long black dragon in the spirit transformation realm straight off the ground. Holding its tail, I swung the gigantic dragon through the air like an enormous black windmill roaring across the sky. One of Long Asian's followers, the same person laughing at me earlier, instantly lost strength in his legs and collapsed onto the ground. But I still was not done. I noticed the ancient formation protecting the 10,000-year Xeran spirit earth and did not hesitate at all. I directly slammed the black dragon into it. Boom! First strike. The formation flashed violently while the black dragon screamed in pain. Boom! Second strike. Cracks spread across the entire formation while the dragon's scales shattered apart. Boom! Third strike. The ancient formation exploded instantly, and the poor black dragon finally lost its last breath after being smashed around so violently. I casually tossed its corpse aside like a dead snake thrown into a ditch. Then I dropped my hoe onto the ground. I could not wait any longer. I immediately opened my harvest-branded sack, pulled out a small shovel from inside, squatted down, and started shoveling spirit soil like there was no tomorrow. The crisp sound of me shoveling spirit soil echoed throughout the entire fallen immortal valley, and as all the remaining geniuses stared at the unconscious black dragon lying at the side and then at me happily stuffing soil into my sacks, their minds completely stopped functioning. Long Asian's face turned deathly pale while his entire body trembled uncontrollably. Earlier, he had thought I was just some worthless country bumpkin, but only now did he realize the truth. What stood before him was a monster. But right in the middle of my joyful digging, the entire secret realm suddenly changed again. Rumble! The earth began cracking apart violently. The 10,000-year Xeran spirit earth beneath my feet trembled together with the entire fallen immortal valley itself. Then a dark, bottomless abyss suddenly split open from deep underground. Blood-red lightning replaced the sky above, while an aura exploded outward from beneath the earth, an energy 100 times more terrifying than the black dragon and 1,000 times more ancient. In the next moment, a cold and arrogant laugh exploded directly into everyone's souls. 10,000 years, a full 10,000 years, finally, this lord has once again seen the light. The voice echoed endlessly as the entire world shook. What foolish, immortal, venerable inheritance. This secret realm was merely bait prepared to lure all of you here. Fresh blood and flesh from this era. Everyone's hearts instantly sank. It was a trap. From beginning to end, this entire secret realm had been nothing but a massive deception. Moments later, a horrifying shadow over 10,000 jang tall slowly rose from the abyss. Its face could not be seen clearly. Only 2 eyes remained visible, like endless black holes devouring everything around them. Just one glance from it nearly shattered the soul of a nascent soul cultivator like Chu Tianko. One heir from an ancient clan immediately recognized it and collapsed to his knees in terror. The heavens wallowing evil immortal. It's the remnant soul of the heavens wallowing evil immortal, imprisoned here by the first immortal venerable. The demonic immortal named Ton Tian seemed to enjoy everyone's fear. First, he casually raised one hand and effortlessly erased the exit portal from the secret dimension. After that, everyone desperately crushed their teleportation stones, but nothing happened. The exit had been completely sealed. At that moment, all the holy sons and holy maidens who had acted so arrogant earlier finally broke down completely. Long Ashen was the first to kneel. His entire body weakened from fear as he repeatedly slammed his head against the ground. Great demonic immortal, I am the holy son of the Sheno sacred land. My blood will surely be useful to you. Please, please spare my life. The holy maiden of Yaoqi also turned pale with terror, crying and screaming that she was willing to become a slave. The others were no different. Every single one of them trembled in fear and revealed every shameful side of themselves, completely disgracing the dignity of cultivators. Tontian smiled in satisfaction before suddenly inhaling deeply. Several kneeling golden core cultivators outside instantly dried up before they could even react. Their flesh, cultivation, and souls were all sucked out and transformed into red streams of light that flew directly into the demon immortal's mouth. All that remained on the ground were shriveled corpses. At that point, all hope completely disappeared. And in this place filled with despair, crying, and screaming, I was the only exception. I did not care about any of his nonsense at all. Right now, my biggest problem was the wind. The evil wind blowing from the abyss was far too strong, almost preventing me from opening my eyes properly. More importantly, it kept trying to blow away my fertilizer sack. So first, I tightly hugged the sack that was already half full of spirit soil. Then I struggled against the wind to firmly tie the sack shut before even placing a large chunk of dirt on top of it to hold it down. I was genuinely worried that even a single grain of fertilizer might get blown away. Naturally, the demonic immortal noticed this scene as well. While everyone else was kneeling or being drained dry, I, a mere mortal with no trace of spiritual power, was sitting there protecting a sack of dirt. Tontian instantly became irritated. A mere mortal dares act disrespectfully before me? The moment he finished speaking, he formed a hand seal and directly used a forbidden technique that surpassed the laws of this world itself. The great art of karma seizure. In the next moment, countless invisible threads appeared out of nowhere from every direction and instantly wrapped around my arms, legs, neck, and the center of my forehead. They were threads of fate itself, connected to my past, present, and future. In theory, once those threads tightened, I should have been completely erased from the flow of time itself. Chu Tianko and Chu Chanyao felt their hearts turn cold as they watched, but Long Ashen suddenly looked as though he had found his final hope. A smile uglier than crying spread across his face. An attack directly on fate itself. This time, he's definitely dead. But 1 second passed, then 10 seconds, then an entire minute. Yet I still stood there exactly the same. Not only was I not erased, not even a single wrinkle had appeared on my clothes. The demonic immortal Tun Tian froze completely. He could clearly sense the threads of fate tightly wrapped around me while the law technique was operating at full force, but I remained completely unmoved. To him, it felt like trying to drag the entire universe using nothing but spider silk. Finally, I noticed something was wrong. I looked down at the sticky things wrapped around my body that were making it harder to move my arms and legs, and my brows immediately furrowed. In my eyes, this was not some grand law of destiny. It simply looked like a mischievous child had wrapped me in spiderwebs. Worse, it was getting in the way of my work. So in front of everyone's horrified eyes, I slowly stretched out my rough, calloused hands, those large hands with fresh dirt still trapped beneath the fingernails, toward something that should have had no form and could never be touched. The threads of fate that normally only souls could perceive. I casually grabbed them with my bare hands. The threads formed from the laws of the universe themselves were firmly held inside my palms. Tontian instantly screamed in disbelief. Impossible! The threads of fate are manifestations of the laws themselves. How can the mortal body of a human touch the roots of law itself? What kind of creature are you? But I ignored him completely. I simply tugged on the threads in my hands a few times, testing their strength before looking up at him with irritation on my face. Hey, what are these broken strings for? Why are they wrapped around me? Are you trying to knit me a sweater or something? The entire world went silent. The holy maiden of Yaoqi stopped breathing for a second and fainted on the spot. Long Ashen's mind completely blanked out while saliva slowly dripped from the corner of his mouth without him even noticing. Those were the laws of destiny, and I was calling them knitting strings. But clearly I had already lost patience. I suddenly tightened my grip on the threads of fate, and the muscles in my arms violently bulged outward like ancient dragons awakening from slumber. In the next instant, Terrifying strength exploded from my arms. The entire secret realm started shaking violently. It was not just the threads trembling, the entire world itself was shaking. The blood-red lightning in the sky suddenly vanished while the ground cracked apart endlessly, space itself filled with fractures like shattered glass. But the most horrifying part was Tontian's gigantic body. Through the threads of fate, I was forcibly dragging him down from the heavens little by little. The earth beneath my feet collapsed deeply inward as I stretched my arms to their limit before letting out a low grunt. Break! In the next second, crack. That sound did not echo through the air. It exploded directly inside everyone's souls. Then came hundreds, thousands, countless snapping sounds one after another. The threads of destiny representing existence and fate themselves were being destroyed through the purest, most violent, and most unreasonable method possible. I was simply tearing all of them apart by force. Tontian looked as though he had been struck simultaneously by millions of giant hammers. Cracks instantly spread across his enormous body while blood essence burst from his mouth. And for the first time ever, fear and panic appeared in his voice. At that exact moment, Long Asian finally broke completely. He suddenly fell to his knees and continuously kowtowed toward me, no longer caring about his dignity at all. When the remaining geniuses saw this, it was like they had discovered their only chance of survival. One after another, they all dropped to their knees before me and desperately begged for mercy. At that moment, they were no longer holy sons or holy maidens. They were merely mortals whose faith had been shattered by fear in the face of something beyond miracles. But by then, the demonic immortal had completely gone insane. Watching everyone kneeling before me caused the last strand of sanity inside him to explode from humiliation and terror. He let out a maddened scream. "Monster! You are a monster! Since I cannot survive anymore, then this world, these blood sacrifices, and even you will all be buried together with me." The moment he finished speaking, he suddenly smashed himself into the sky of the secret realm, offering his shattered soul to heaven and earth itself as he forcibly activated the world-destroying formation of annihilation. The entire secret realm instantly began collapsing toward its end. The sky shattered apart like broken glass, exposing the cold and lifeless void behind it, while the earth rapidly sank inward toward the center. A gigantic black grinding wheel, formed from countless fragments of spatial laws, slowly appeared in the middle of the secret realm. Every time it rotated, endless spatial cracks split open around it like the blades of a monstrous meat grinder. Mountains, rivers, forests, plants, everything it touched was instantly destroyed. Chu Tianko and Chu Chaniao desperately struggled to resist the space slashes surrounding them from every direction, their faces already pale from exhaustion. As for me, I first looked down at the half-filled sack of 10,000-year living spirit soil that I had worked so hard to dig up. My thoughts were actually very simple. Tie the sack properly first, then leave this insane place. But who could have expected that at the exact moment I bent down, a violent spatial storm suddenly roared past my side? I wasn't affected at all, but the sack beside my feet with the Harvest brand logo was instantly swept away. That sack that was only half full, along with the glowing 5-colored spirit soil inside it, flew through the air like a dazzling rainbow before being swallowed directly into a deep black spatial crack nearby. The crack immediately closed afterward. Half my spirit soil was gone. Even the sack itself disappeared. Time seemed to stop in that instant. Space was collapsing. The earth was crumbling apart. The evil immortal was laughing madly while Chu Chaniao cried out in despair. But inside my world, only one thing remained. My fertilizer was gone. In the next moment, a murderous aura over 10,000 times more terrifying than the world-destroying grinder suddenly awakened from within my body. The black grinding wheel stopped spinning. Space itself froze completely. Even the evil immortal's laughter abruptly stopped, as if someone had grabbed his throat. Everyone present felt an indescribable terror erupt from the depths of their souls. Slowly, I raised my head. My eyes, once calm and clear, had become an endless abyss filled with blood-colored darkness. I stared coldly at the black grinding wheel in the sky, and at the trembling, evil immortal hiding behind it before speaking one sentence, each word carrying terrifying pressure. "Give me back my soil." The moment I said that, I slowly clenched my right fist. The grinding of my bones and muscles created a rumbling sound, like the birth of the universe itself. After that, I no longer cared about laws, techniques, or formations. I only did the simplest thing possible. I poured all of my anger into a single punch. "Enough with your nonsense. Take this." The instant that punch was released, the world in front of my fist suddenly disappeared for no reason at all. Light vanished. Sound vanished. Even space and time themselves vanished. At the end of my fist, only a tiny hole of pure darkness remained, as though absolute nothingness itself had descended into existence for the sole purpose of denying everything around it. And so, the world-destroying grinder formed from fragments of spatial laws. The moment it touched my punch, there was no explosion, no violent sound, not even resistance. It simply began erasing itself silently from the edges inward. Then, the black void touched the evil immortal Tun Tian himself, the being who had plotted and schemed for 10,000 entire years. That ancient evil immortal who had nearly slaughtered all the greatest geniuses of the entire Tianlan realm did not even manage to scream. Together with his karma, memories, and every trace of his existence, he was completely crushed into nothingness. He did not turn into ashes, he was directly erased. But my punch still wasn't finished. After erasing the grinder and the evil immortal, it continued forward and slammed directly into the barrier of the secret realm itself. Crack! After a sharp sound that made everyone's souls tremble, the entire blood-red sky shattered apart like glass. Billions of black cracks instantly spread throughout the entire secret realm. In the next moment, that entire miniature world was destroyed from the inside by a single punch from me. Fragmented pieces of space scattered everywhere, while the ground beneath everyone vanished. All the survivors fell at the same time, and when they opened their eyes again, they crashed back into the fallen immortal valley of the central state like discarded sacks. Above the sky, an enormous black hole appeared, as though someone had forcibly carved away a piece of heaven itself. Just looking at it was terrifying. Long Aishan, the holy maiden of Yaoqi, Chu Tianko, everyone lay sprawled on the ground trembling violently. Even glancing toward the black hole filled them with horror. But at that exact moment, the sound of someone dusting dirt off their clothes suddenly came from the rubble. Cursing under my breath, I stood up from the pile of broken stones while still holding half of a torn sack with the words Harvest Brand printed on it. The opening of the sack was completely destroyed, and there was nothing left inside. I lowered my head to look at it before glancing around the ruined surroundings. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Damn it! What kind of trash secret realm was that? The soil was terrible and the wind was ridiculously strong too. Half a day of hard work wasted for nothing. After saying that, I casually threw away the torn half of the sack, picked up the hoe that I had never let go of from beginning to end, and turned around to leave. The moment I moved, all the holy sons and holy maidens who had been lying on the ground instantly crawled backward in panic like they had just seen a ghost. Every time I took a step forward, they retreated farther away. In the end, the entire fallen immortal valley forcibly opened a massive path for me. Everyone bent their waists 90 degrees with their heads lowered, holding their breath without even daring to breathe loudly. It looked as though they were sending off an ancient god walking among mortals. Chu Tianko and Chu Chongjiao hurriedly stood up from the ground and followed behind me. As Chu Chongjiao walked, his eyes shone brighter and brighter. First, he looked at my back as I dragged my hoe behind me, then he raised his head toward the enormous black hole in the sky. It was as if thunder exploded inside his mind and gave him sudden enlightenment. What sword path? What laws? What divine abilities? All of that is meaningless. In front of absolute strength, every trick and technique is nothing but illusion. His lips trembled violently while his whole body shook with excitement. He kept muttering to himself, I finally understand now. The Tao gave birth to one gave birth to two gave birth to three, and three gave birth to all things. But the origin of all things, wasn't it that all along? That's it. That's the true answer. From that day onward, he decided he would no longer practice swordsmanship. Instead, he would lift iron and use every ounce of spiritual energy he possessed to strengthen his physical body. Meanwhile, I had no time to care about whatever strange realization he had gained. The only thing on my mind was the half sack of spirit soil that had flown away. By the time I returned to the small courtyard behind the mountains of the Qinyan sect, the sky had already darkened. Losing half a sack of 10,000-year spirit soil had put me in a terrible mood. But when I rummaged through the torn sack, a small handful of 5-colored spirit soil suddenly fell out from the very bottom. It wasn't much, but it was still better than nothing. My eyes immediately lit up. I quickly took that precious fertilizer and carefully scattered it across my spirit rice field. Just as I expected, several stalks of spirit rice instantly became visibly healthier and more vibrant. Their leaves looked full of life, and even the aura of vitality surrounding them noticeably thickened. At last, a satisfied smile finally appeared on my face. At least this trip wasn't completely wasted. However, just as I felt content and prepared to head back inside to cook, boom! A deafening clap of thunder suddenly exploded across the sky. The moment I looked up, my expression instantly darkened. The once clear night sky had somehow become completely covered by a gigantic 9-colored tribulation cloud. Inside the cloud, lightning snakes danced wildly while endless flashes illuminated the heavens. A terrifying pressure descended slowly from the sky, powerful enough to make every living being in the entire Tianlan realm tremble in fear. I stared at the tribulation cloud while my brows tightened even further, my face filled with annoyance and worry. What now? Why did the weather suddenly change change again? Is it about to rain heavily? I just finished putting fertilizer on the field. I hope the rain doesn't wash it away. Meanwhile, outside the Tianlan realm, within the endless chaos of the cosmos, above a river of time where an immortal palace floated silently in space, inside a magnificent immortal hall constructed from the skeletons of countless stars, a pair of gigantic eyes that had remained closed for who knew how many tens of thousands of years suddenly opened. Those eyes held no emotion whatsoever, only absolute order and supreme majesty. Then a cold voice, sounding like the laws of heaven themselves, echoed throughout the entire immortal realm. Someone in the lower realm used pure physical strength to destroy the web of karmic laws that I personally established. Long ago, I personally severed the path of body cultivation from that world. How could such a being appear there? He cannot be allowed to live. Deliver my decree. Activate the great nine heavens divine lightning formation and purge that world completely. Correct the karma.